Coming up next, actually coming up right now, who needs credits? Who needs them? Especially for a very special episode like this. An episode that I am calling Ender's Pregame.
All right.
This is the episode where Jake is going to lay out his entire defense strategy because he's going to go up against the trial master himself.
I think you mean Jake's going to create his entire defense strategy.
Well, Jake, you have been tasked in the epic Ender's Game trial that is upcoming in our next episode.
Okay.
I hope in our next episode.
Okay.
Who needs them? Especially for a very special episode like this. An episode that I am calling Ender's Pregame.
All right.
This is the episode where Jake is going to lay out his entire defense strategy because he's going to go up against the trial master himself.
I think you mean Jake's going to create his entire defense strategy.
Well, Jake, you have been tasked in the epic Ender's Game trial that is upcoming in our next episode.
Okay.
I hope in our next episode. Brendan's got a kind of busy holiday patch right now, but Crick don't rise and all that sort of thing. Our next episode will be Ender's Game, the trial. We've done one other trial for people who don't know. By the way, I'm Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient post. That's the pastor who's a master of reading right there, Jake Menzel.
That's me.
We have done one other trial in our run, Jake.
Indeed.
You want to tell people about this?
Yeah, we did a trial of, what's the name of that book? It's on one of my shelves over here.
I don't know.
Ready Player One.
Ready Player One, yes. The world that we're all quickly moving into now that old Zuckerberg's
launched the metaverse.
Yeah. The metaverse and all that.
Yeah, Ready Player One. Put it on trial, and I sure made Brandon
squirm, and then dance, and then what else does one make one?
It's like I had him under the Imperious curse. He just did what I wanted him to do by the time it was done.
Well, you got him to...
And I exonerated. I got him to put Ernest Cline and Leo Tolstoy in the same sentence, in the same category.
And admit that Cline was better than Tolstoy. I mean, it was a massacre.
It was a massacre.
It was a massacre.
Yeah.
And so...
It's like, OJ's attorneys had nothing on me that day.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, you were full on. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. All that good stuff. Yeah, it was a bloodbath. And I don't know, how are we feeling?
And I let a murderer walk free.
Yeah. Well, it was so bad that as the judge, I had to help step in and kind of help
it was
Brandon
2-on-1. And I still won.
Basically just canceled the trial because not so much to protect Brandon as to protect you, because people were going to feel so bad towards you for being such I believe the technical term is a meanie pants.
Yes.
That something had to be done. So,
I just felt like I was tasked with defending. I felt a little bit like Saul Goodman in his role as public defender. And
right.
What was I supposed to do?
What were you supposed to do?
What was I supposed to do? The only thing to do is get a little dirty and take the gloves off. And
I mean, the fact was you had some points because Ready Player One is a perfectly fine book, and Brandon overshot a little bit. I mean, you can't actually prove that Ready Player One isn't a perfectly fine piece of fluff. Yeah.
Well, and the problem with Brandon is he does tend to overshoot, and it's a function. Dare I say it? I know he's not here to defend himself when I say this, but it's a function. You know what? I won't say it. Mm-hmm. I'll say instead it's a function of his high
stupidity
taste and high standards. I was going to say snobbery. But when he demanded that Ready Player One be held to the standard of War and Peace, then basically he wrote off all the rest of literature, and that's where I had him. And then he wanted to talk about the moral superiority of Tolstoy. And
right. And that was his fatal flaw, because once you've asked Ready Player One to basically be the Bible, it actually can't, because, or not Ready Player One, sorry, War and Peace. Once you've asked War and Peace to just be Holy Writ, it actually doesn't work, because War and Peace is a flawed work written by a flawed man. And so,
and the minute that you point that out and start punching holes in that, then everything unravels. And so,
yeah,
that was it. That was the whole ball game.
But we're going to give Brandon a little bit of an advantage if he wants it, because he can actually listen to this episode. This episode will be out in time. Ender's pregame. He can listen to Ender's pregame, and he can mount the best prosecution against Ender's game that he wants to. Because I'm going to sit here and make you outline a defense. I mean, it's not like you can't call additional witnesses or keep some surprises up your sleeves, but let's at least sort of begin to outline a defense of Ender's Game and how one might defend that book.
Well, it should be easier because it's a better book, and
it's a much better book.
I actually like it.
Yeah,
as opposed to Ready Player One, which is fine. It's a fine little piece of trash.
It is a fine piece of trash, but it is trashy.
Yeah.
And the morals are bad, and the
morals in Ender's Game aren't great, but it's sure a bit of really interesting and compelling dystopian sci-fi,
right?
That I really enjoyed thoroughly from the moment I started it. He does a good job of getting you on the hook and keeping you there, propelling you forward. And so I think from that standpoint, and this is one of the things that we talk about a lot here and also in other places, if you want to be good, you need to at least be interesting. And if you're not interesting and compelling, then forget it. You don't qualify as good. If you can't make me turn the page, then I don't care about your insights or your moral perspective or your style or your characterization or your anything. It doesn't matter if you can't make me turn the page.
Yep.
Then you lose. If you want to be one of the greats, or if you want to have something successful, you actually have to be readable. The kind of thing that people want to read and will actually turn the page on. And so, I mean, that right there is probably out of the gate one of the things that Card has going for him in a really strong way. So you've got page turning.
Let me actually interrupt right there to interject. I have actually read about Orson Scott Card that he has developed a technique for keeping readers turning the pages. And he says it's a mechanical thing that can be taught. It's just something that he figured out early in his career. And he's got like just a dyed-in-the-wool technique that he uses. And I don't know what it is. He actually says you don't want to learn it unless you want to be a commercial fiction writer and you don't care about fiction, because he says once you've learned it, it will unravel so many of your favorite stories and you won't be able to see anything but this. You won't enjoy them. It'll reduce everything to mechanics for you. And so he says you don't want to know my technique, but I've got one, which is something I remember reading years ago, and it's stuck with me. And I kept thinking of it during Ender's Game because it is, I don't know how much truth there is even in what I just said, but Ender's Game is one of those books that you just keep turning those pages on.
It's a page turner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have, I mean, a lot of the things that we respect just from a foundational level in any good work. You have a good plot, a compelling plot, compelling structure, good setups, good payoffs, interesting characters, interesting character development, interesting world building. It's all there. And so in a lot of ways, Card has a lot of the same talent level that he brings to a book like this that J.K. Rowling brings to Harry Potter, that some of the best adventure story type writers that we've read, or sci-fi writers that we've read, Bradbury, very similar talent stacks as a writer.
Yeah.
And his ability to be, just thoughtful, compelling, interesting world, interesting characters, interesting moral dilemmas, and just a well-told story that keeps you turning the page. All those things are really great, really fun, really cool. And one of the interesting things I think really worth talking about. I suspect Brandon will come at the morality of this book.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking I would do if I was in his shoes.
And that will be probably his first point of attack. I think the defense that I'll just go ahead and show my cards because I'm
no pun intended.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, they're coming to me as I am talking it out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the moral perspective of the world that Card has created is necessarily the moral perspective of Card. I think it's as much a dystopian sort of horror novel as it is anything else. And so it's not meant to espouse the world that Ender inherits and lives in and is forced into. It's
all the sociopathic kind of dark stuff is not aspirational. It's just quite the opposite, actually. It's a tragedy. It's sad that these kids grow up this way and that they're talked into doing the kinds of things and pay the kinds of prices that they have to pay, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they're used and abused, and you have their handlers who are, feel the moral dilemma of it themselves and have made a Machiavellian choice, put these kids through horrible things and made them do horrible things and made them into horrible people. And it's all just sort of dystopian. And so if I'm Brandon at that point, I say, yeah, but part of the kick, part of the hit that you're taking is, wouldn't it be cool if you were turned into a sociopathic killing machine and you weren't even really morally responsible for being turned into that?
Right.
How cool would it be to have that to have Ender's power?
You want Ender to ace all of the games, and you're always happy that he does so well at being a sociopathic killing machine. You're never not happy that Ender does exactly what his stupid dystopian society expects and is programming him to do.
Yeah.
If anything, you're happy that he circumnavigates the rules so that he can figure out an even more efficient way to brutally get done what they want, basically. So,
yeah, and he has to be human still in all the right ways and all the right places in order for that to work and be sold. He doesn't know that he's responsible for anybody's death until it's all over.
Right.
He doesn't know that he's responsible for genocide until it's all over.
Right.
He thought he was playing a game. That's the whole conceit, right? He didn't know that he killed those kids. He knew that he was in danger and he had to fight his way out of it.
Right.
And he was bred special. So there's a little bit more precision and a little bit more intensity in his kicks and punches and whatever else he did than he was capable of.
I just want to say, in case the format denies me the ability to ever say this, another opportunity to say this, the fact that Ender's Game ends up being Ender's Genocide is one of the best twists in sci-fi. I love that twist. And it's an obvious twist, and it's one that everybody kind of knows now. And maybe it was even obvious back then, but I still just love it.
I think it must have been obvious back then because I did not know it going in, but I knew it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I knew that that's where we were headed, that there would be a certain point at which he's going to play a game, and the game is the actual war.
Right. But I don't.
And to what degree has he been playing it the whole time is sort of a question that I figured would be interesting to find the answer to.
Right.
But
I don't think that a twist is good because it surprises you. I think a twist is good because it fits the world and tells a story. And
it's done effectively. It feels inevitable, and it completes the story in a way that makes sense of everything else. And that's what it does, and it's really great.
Yeah.
As a conceit.
Yeah, you were giving Brandon's counterattack or potential.
Yeah, I'm going to argue, well, it's not the worldview that he's espousing or that he's putting forward for us to embrace. It's something that we should be horrified by. Mm-hmm. And the right response to that is, but part of what's compelling about everything is you're cheering Ender on the whole way through it.
We can say, oh no, John Wick was forced to become an assassin again, but we're still enjoying watching John Wick shoot all those bad guys in the head.
Right. And so that's the place where my argument crumbles a little bit as the defense for my client.
Let me play Brandon and push it even a little farther, and we'll see if we can. So, also, just in terms of entertainment value, you are forced to live in a very sour world with a very sour protagonist and a very sour set of moral dilemmas and a very humorless kind of story.
Yeah, but not
is
for
this book. Is this book actually fun?
Yes, and part of it is it's the right length. It's you don't have to live there for very long.
Right.
It's not the same as Blood Meridian.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's a stupid comparison, I guess. But Blood Meridian, because Blood Meridian is pretty vile, but also you have to live there a lot longer. You have to live in depraved headspace for a long time in that book.
Right.
In Ender's Game, you don't live there long. You're propelled forward to the end pretty quickly. But
it's still like even if it's just a couple hours in a room full of secondhand smoke as opposed to the full lungfuls of cigar smoke that Blood Meridian is, it's still, if I'm Brandon, I'm going to argue, just kind of unhealthy and frankly unpleasant to spend so much time in this humorous, sociopathic world.
Humorless, I think you meant. But yeah, and I agree. And that's why I'm not going to give the book to my kids, and I'm not going to bother with the sequel, although I thought about it. But I'm glad for having read it. And I think as a piece of craftsmanship, it's everything that you could want from a commercial pop craftsman.
Mm-hmm.
There's just nothing. There's nothing from a craftsmanship point of view that you can really fault it with, except not being War and Peace,
right?
Which is not what it's trying to be. So, yeah, if and this is also a reason that I thought about reading sequel, because what I read, which you guys probably covered in context, but the book was originally a short story in a magazine in the 70s that he built out into a novel and add this and released the sequel the following year. So they came out back to back, and so it was a 2-part story. And then of course, the Enderverse is like endless and impossible. But it does make me wonder. It gives you that bit at the end, that bit of hope, that bit of maybe Ender really does rise above his programming, become a whole person. Maybe he figures out how to save this alien race. Maybe it ends up. Maybe we just saw acts 1 and 2,
right?
And we get another act where it's the healing of Ender.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know actually how it goes. I don't know where it goes from here or what. And maybe it's worth asking.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read them. I have read other Orson Scott Card things and read a lot of short fiction by him in my time. And it's worth noting that, he seems like a very conscientious man. He's a Mormon. He's still with his first wife. He seems like just a thoughtful, decent, not somebody that we would consider a brother in Christ, obviously, but just a decent pagan sort of person, with the weird extra spin of religiosity that comes from his Mormonism. But the other thing is he's got a lot of flavors in him. He can do much more garish, overtly horrific, like stuff that's not a slow burn like this, but is much more just like flamboyantly disgusting. Not like in a Blood Meridian way or a Stephen King way or anything, but just, he can be more overt in the terrible stuff that he does. And then he can also do much warmer, more familial, more happy, more, a mentor that actually feels lovable, type stuff. And so I don't know. So this is it's not like this is his only mode. I think this actually adds to your argument and detracts from Brandon's hypothetical argument. This is not his only mode. He's doing it intentionally here. He's building a particular kind of world with a particular kind of point that he wants to make, and it's not the thing that he does all the time or the only thing that he can do. It's not like if we tried to read those other Dun Cow books and figured out, as I believe we would have, that Walter Wangerin had about one thing that he could do. So I'll throw that into the mix.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that Brandon might try to do is attack style.
Mm-hmm.
If he does that, I'm not going to have a lot of patience for it. I rarely do. I think when a writer has a style that is unobtrusive and gets the job done, then his style is successful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can read Card without thinking about his style, then he's doing exactly what he means to do. And that's a remarkable feat in and of itself. And that's the way that he reads. And that's the way that any kind of commercial pop artist needs to function. And it's an art. And it's denigrating to the artistry of somebody who can do that sort of thing well. Just because it's not high art doesn't mean it's not art. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's another point where I'm ready to fight. Another front I'm ready to fight on.
Well, it just to write a great descriptive paragraph with prose that just sings, I don't know that that's any harder than consistently staying out of the way,
right,
the way a truly great pop prose stylist does. I mean, and just to give an example of how hard that is, I'd say somebody as great as J.K. Rowling does it maybe 70% of the time.
Right.
Sometimes she's just really, really good, and then sometimes she's lazy and she gets in the way and she piles up the adverbs and especially the dreaded adverb that comes after he said laughingly or he said smoothly. She likes to she has some annoying tics and mannerisms and bad style things that actually are, for anyone who loves language, you don't have to be a hyper snob to just be kind of annoyed and trip over them a little bit.
Yeah, but Card 95+% of the time is never in the way.
No, I think of all the people, of Madeline L. Ingle, of everyone we've read who's just a sturdy, popular prose stylist. Frank Herbert. He might be the best. I mean,
he might be the best. I think I'm willing to stand on that or stand behind that. At least put him in the. I can't think of who I would put ahead of him.
Right. I can think of lots of people like Ready Player One guy, Ernest Cline, who have something vaguely annoying about them or have little mannerisms or tics that I don't like.
I mean, Herbert's pretty good, but Herbert gets in his own way more often than I recall Card doing. Same with Rowling. They're also at disadvantages in the sense that their books are massive, and this is a short, tight, compact little thing.
Right.
So that's another, but then again, he stays within his limits, right? Mm-hmm. Like he stays in his lane and he doesn't make mistakes there. And so this book, as a piece of genre fiction that knows exactly what it's trying to be, is pretty perfect at execution, in its execution. Like I can picture, and here's the other amazing thing about this book, too, that I just think, guys, have you read a piece of 40-plus-year-old sci-fi that just straight up feels like it could have been written last year? Like, what in the world? What in the world? Like, I did not realize how old this book was until I was almost done with it.
Yeah.
Like, I forget, like, there was one little thing about knobs and buttons or something, like, in one of the final chapters, where I was like, wait a minute, how old is this book?
No, he does a great job with the specific computer game. He kind of straddles the line where it could be more VR or it could be like a 16-bit thing. You don't really know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
He really straddles a number of lines nicely so that it just
totally translates. Like, I was imagining for most of the book my own futuristic little version of this thing that I did not, and I wasn't translating. I wasn't taking Bradbury's ideas of,
mechanical hounds.
Right. I just thought I just lived easily in that world as a world of the future. And that, I mean, talk about some visionary stuff like Star Trek and whatever else doesn't touch it. nothing. Bradbury touches it.
Bradbury's a great parallel because Fahrenheit 451 is such a silly retro book. It's so 1950s. Right. From the fact that Montag has a housewife at home, to the mechanical hound, to the way that the fire truck, like every bit of technology. There's not a moment of that book where you don't trip over how old-fashioned and silly all of Ray Bradbury's sci-fi conceits are.
Yeah, I mean, think Back to the Future was after this book, and this book lives in our future way better than Back to the Future does. So
I will say, since I want to circle back to the style thing and say, I think actually, now that I'm off my soapbox, J.K. Rowling and Frank Herbert are both better because they're taking much bigger risks. They're actually trying. Like J.K. Rowling, for all her annoying tics, is trying for some transcendent beauty in places, and she's trying for humor and whimsy almost all the time. And those things are just much harder to do well. And so she stumbles a whole lot more. And Frank Herbert, same thing. He's trying for this kind of grand, quasi-biblical feeling narrative.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so he stumbles, and it's kind of stupid and silly in some places, but it's because he has way grander ambitions than Orson Scott Card does.
Yeah, that's fair. But
that's not an attack on Card. That's just...
No, that's just... I mean, I'm just making the case that I'm not going to give an inch on style if Brandon attacks on that front. And I don't know where else you would attack. You're going to attack morals, you're going to attack style, and then at the end of the day, Brandon's going to say it's a waste of anyone's time. He's going to say, when in a world where we've lived with the novel for hundreds of years, where there are so many truly great things, why would we bother? Why waste a second on Ender's Game, on Orson Scott Card? I'm annoyed that we had to read it or something like that. Like, I don't know that I'll actually go that far, but for the sake of preparation, let's say that he does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Brandon, some things are fun, and some sci-fi conceits allow you to ask tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things going on in the background of this too. Like, people are only allowed to have one kid. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a highly engineered one world, one humanity thing that is what the only thing that could unite us is a common enemy. And it's a bunch of interesting questions, right? Like a bunch of interesting thoughts and places that can get people thinking.
Yeah. And it's pretty prophetic in its humble little way.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's so silly about that argument is the false binary. You can have Shakespeare too. You can still read Tolstoy. I encourage people to read Tolstoy. If someone's only reading Orson Scott Card, I encourage them to stop reading Orson Scott Card and read other things. But if somebody just wants to read Ender's Game and, read a couple of them, that's fine. And then they can read good things. You can have a diet that involves steak over here and asparagus over here and potatoes over here, and it's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to try and tell me that steak isn't the same thing as ice cream. Duh.
Huh.
Well, maybe this will just be like Guy Ritchie's immortal classic Sherlock Holmes, where you just told us how you were going to beat the crap out of Brandon, and we saw the slow motion version of it. And then the next episode will be the fast version. Or maybe Brandon will listen to this episode and he'll be Sherlock Holmes, and he'll see where like all your attacks
all the chinks in the armor.
Yeah. And he will come prepared. We will give Brandon every opportunity.
I think if Brandon listens to this, Brandon will come and I'll just be like, I give up.
I think if he's a fat loser, that's what he'll do. I think if he's any kind of a man, he will take this.
Acknowledge that I've already won before the fight was ever had, just like Sherlock in those movies.
And then come up with the clever thing that Sherlock would do where he would totally bust up. I mean, I think there's some thread he could find. He could come harder at morality, probably. I mean, he could really try and make a run at morality. Dangerous, probably undoable, but he could come even stronger than we did today.
Well, that'd be the place. And but if you're going to come at the king, you better not miss. So if he's going to come at me, he better land that blow. If he's going to be swinging, if he thinks he's got a puncher's chance, he better connect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not going to I'm going to be an impartial judge on this one. I'm not going to stop the bloodbath. Everyone just might have to learn to hate you, Jake, because if you just beat the crap out of Brandon, then
he'll have deserved it.
He'll have deserved it. But you know, I'm pulling for him. I hope he learned a few things from last time, and you know, I hope he at least gets a glancing blow at the king before he gets the crap beat out of him. Like, can he make you bleed?
Yeah, can he make me bleed? That's the question. That's the real question, in my opinion.
Maybe you're just the height of arrogance, though. Maybe he comes in and wipes the floor with you. Maybe he's the king. It's been a long time since we've had a trial.
Yeah, it's true.
I think
Batman ended up defeating Superman after all.
He did. The son of Krypton himself, defeated by
mere mortal
detective in a bat suit.
Actually, it was Abomination or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Defeated by a crazy Lex Luthor type guy named Lex Luthor. What are the other great upsets in history besides Batman v Superman? The great upset in history.
David and Goliath.
David and Goliath. Yeah. David. Nobody.
I'm just a giant Philistine.
I guess that might be the great upset in history.
It's the one by which all upsets are measured.
Yeah, it is. It is. What are the great David and Goliath stories of all time besides David and Goliath? What are the other great upsets? I'm trying to think of sports movies.
Moses and Pharaoh. The Russians beating Kurt Russell and the Americans beating the Russians in the hockey thing. Mm-hmm.
Gene Hackman and his white guys beating all those big black guys.
in Hoosiers.
Mm-hmm. The most inadvertently politically incorrect movie.
Harry defeating Lord Voldemort.
Hey, yeah. Percy defeating Nagini, or Percy, what's his name? Not Percy.
Neville.
Neville, yeah, I don't know why. Percy.
Come on,
Percy
man.
Jackson.
Neville's like the best thing about that book.
He is. He actually gets a real hero's arc, unlike certain characters whose name rhyme with Barry Blotter. Okay. Well, this has been Ender's pregame. If you're listening, Brandon, I'm pulling for you, man.
Go ahead and throw in the towel, Brandon. It's okay.
Brandon, it's going to be bad.
Throw in the towel. Throw the towel.
I'm not letting you. You can't just come here and say,
I'm Ivan Drago.
Yeah. Well, if Brandon wants to defend America against
living in America,
your communist, whatever it is, whatever the word is, I want your communist, bodacious brutality. That's not the word I want. Ferocity. I don't know. All right. Ender's pregame. We'll do a great patron read at the end of that trial. Whoever wins will get to greet the patrons. The loser won't even get to talk to the patrons. They can just sit on the sidelines with Dracula and Frankenstein. But yeah, I think that's everything. We've laid out your entire strategy. Jake, do you have aces that you haven't shown? I'm not going to ask you to show them. I'm just saying.
I don't presently have any cards up my sleeve, but you never know what will happen between now and the date of the trial.
Got Orson Scott Card up your sleeve, and that's all you need, my friend.
The only card I need.